Hey friends, it's Laura. Welcome back. I hope you are having a wonderful day. In today's planty video, I am going to be showing you my begonias, and I do not think I've ever made a begonia video. The main reason being that I grow my begonias all in enclosed situations, terrariums, pickle jars, etc. And I've always felt a little bit self-conscious, or just like maybe I'm not that good at plants because I can't grow a begonia successfully out in the room without anything helping it grow. But I've decided that actually it's pretty normal to be growing these plants in terrariums. I live in Canada where it is very dry, and I'm trying to grow this humidity loving tropical plant. And you know what? I'm doing what I can. So I've decided I'm just gonna make this video, and hopefully begonia lovers will enjoy, and maybe you also have tried to grow begonias and failed and felt like a failure. I'm gonna talk about how I grow them as well as I go. Of course, I will just be chatting about their little living conditions, and of course just showing off their beautiful leaves. I think that is what we love about begonias, as well as the flowers, and I have one that is about to bloom. It's really exciting. If you love begonias or just want to see my begonias, stay tuned. All right, I'm gonna show you every begonia as up close as I can, but I also wanted to show where it is in the room, just so that you have kind of a context if you are trying to grow begonias, so that you understand the lighting that each plant is receiving. Right behind me is my begonia maculata. And it is getting, like, that light over there is the window. So it's getting direct light, but not burning light, if that makes sense. Now, I'll just show you the container, and then I'll show you the plant more up close. Begonia maculata is definitely the plant that got me into begonias. I remember this was fairly hard to find for a long time, and then Rona, I think, had it, or Home Depot or something. It was like, oh, how does Home Depot have it? And I went and drove and got it, and it looked beautiful for maybe a week, and then all the leaves started browning and crisping, and I just felt so sad, because I think Begonia maculata for a lot of people is just such a crazy plant. Oh, and there's another begonia in there too. I'll talk about it. It's just such a beautiful, whimsical, weird plant. The polka dots are crazy. Anyway, so I failed and I gave up, but I had this little tiny cutting that I saved, and I just kept keeping that cutting alive in different propagation situations, jars of water, just plain pots. But every time the leaves would grow back, it would just be a fail, but I kept it alive. So this is still that original Begonia maculata that I got from, I think it was Rona, one of those stores. It is still that plant, but as you can see, it is doing really, really well. And obviously what has changed is I gave up on growing begonias out in the room, like just without any extra humidity, and I started growing them in enclosed spaces. This terrarium, is it a terrarium? This vessel is a thrifted container that I got from the thrift store. I am not sure what it was used for prior, but it fits the maculata so perfectly because it can just grow upwards, and the leaves can be long and big, and there's no issue. It has grown to the top, and then I snipped it and propagated. Sometimes I snip and just compost because you don't need to propagate everything you prune. But I'm gonna set this down and take the lid off so you can see the leaves a bit more up close. There is another begonia in there, which I don't know. Oh yeah, you can see. So that is a begonia zumba, I believe. I have been trying to positively identify that plant, but I believe it is a begonia zumba. And I grew that from a leaf. I propagated a leaf. Another thing I love about begonias is you can propagate them through regular cuttings, through stem cuttings, but also leaves. You can literally just cut the leaf off, press it into soil, and it will, most of the time, propagate, and I love doing that. I have done that to most of my begonias. It is just so fun to watch. So I propagated that from a leaf in a different little container, and then once it got bigger, I planted it in there, and I can't wait for it to sort of spread out below. Like, I'm hoping it will just fill out this sort of bulbous part. We'll see though. We'll see how it goes. Anyway, I'm gonna put this down so that we can see up close. All right, so I will take this lid off. And you can see already there's this new leaf coming in, which is so beautiful. The baby leaves on Begonia maculata are so cute. And I guess it's hard to show the fronts of the leaves from the top here, but they are so healthy. I find when I tried to grow this out in regular room climate, they would just crisp up immediately. They'd come out beautiful and then they'd just crisp up, or even before they had opened up, they were already starting to crisp up. And here's the little begonia zumba. So adorable. You can see a little tiny leaf in the back there that's starting to come out. I find that when growing these plants in jars, they do tend to stick their leaves out as far as possible and almost touch the glass if they can. And some begonias, the leaves will almost melt when they are too wet. Fortunately, maculata is not one of them. We'll see with Zumba how it's touching the glass like that. We'll see if it melts, but it's been doing really well so far. I haven't noticed any leaves rotting just yet. I really like how this plant looks in this vessel. I feel like it looks really magical and almost like a fairy tale plant. Next terrarium we will be peeking into is this round terrarium. And it is really close to a window, but it's not getting any direct sunlight. It gets a little bit of direct sunlight in the evenings in the summer because the sun kind of comes down onto it. But most of the time it's getting really indirect light. And I love this terrarium because the top just completely comes off so we can see everything really up close. Now, first of all, most of these plants are begonias, but not all of them are begonias. This is not a begonia, but it's really cool. This is a Labesia dino skin, and I just got this recently in my plant import, and I noticed there is some new growth coming in, which is really, really exciting. These are terrarium loving plants, I have learned, so I popped them in there. I think probably eventually it's going to outgrow this space, but for now it seems really happy. It's rooting into the soil, so far so good. You'll notice there's also some string of turtles in there, and they're putting out this like teeny tiny string of turtles, which is really, really cool. String of turtles seem to love terrariums as well, and I thought it could kind of just fill in the soil area. And back here is a Fittonia. I have found that Fittonias also, like begonias, I can only grow in a terrarium situation, so I popped some cuttings in there as well to kind of add some color. Now, first of all, there is a Begonia maculata in here as well. This was a cutting from that big mama plant that I just showed you. And the way that I propagated it is I just had trimmed that plant because it had gotten too big, and I cut some leaves off and put them into the soil. You can see here is a leaf that hasn't yet put out any growth, but it's been in here for weeks and it hasn't rotted, which means it is rooting. And when I try and lift it up, it is stuck to the soil. So that means it is rooting, it's sticking into the soil, and will soon put out a plant. And this plant, the leaf has completely rotted. That's pretty normal, but it put out this beautiful plant, which is really cool. And you can see here, I've got an alien guy in here guarding all the begonias. If we go to the back here, this is probably currently one of my favorite begonias. This is called Begonia soli mutata, which apparently in Latin means that it changes with the sun. And what I've learned is that the more sun it gets, the more these green stripes are contrasting and glowing. And it also has sort of a pink margin here. You can see on this leaf, the pink margin. So all those colors, I guess, come out more the more light that the plant gets. You can see on this leaf that you can barely see the variegation. I mean, the leaf is still so beautiful because of the texture, but the variegation is not really there. I think that this plant is getting enough light because this is a new leaf and there's lots of variegation. And then these newer leaves as well have the variegation. So far so good. I got this probably only about 6 months ago and I've been really happy with it so far. I find when I get a new begonia into my home, it takes a long time to get used to its new climate and it drops a lot of leaves. So this plant did lose a lot of its original leaves, but has put out a ton of new leaves as well. And I just love the texture on this. It is so interesting. It looks like a reptile. So interesting. I find begonias in general have really, really interesting textures. Over here, this is again the begonia zumba. So the same type of plant that was planted in that other terrarium with the maculata. And this plant was just, again, another propagation trying to make another one grow. I like to also have backups of begonias just because they are so finicky. I don't want to ever lose the plant completely. So I took a cutting and planted it in here. You can see it has little hairs on the leaf, which is really cool. And of course the color is so interesting. And there's just the two leaves on that one. Oh, there's a little tiny baby leaf starting. That's so cute. The stems on this plant are really, really interesting as well. They look like an alien plant or something. Over here, this, I believe, is also Begonia zumba. I believe. If it's not, I don't know what begonia it is. Sometimes I find begonias, the propagations are really, really different from the mama plant. And I don't mind that. I think this is a really, really interesting plant. And I love that it puts out all these different leaves. You can see here the stem is almost all red. Whereas this one, it's like red with white. But I do think that that is the Begonia zumba again. But I don't know, they look really, really different. But when this plant was really big, when I bought it in the store, it had all these leaves and all the leaves were slightly different. So that's my best guess, but I have to wait till it gets a bit older. Down here is some little tiny leaves. Those are actually my Begonia silver dollar, but these ones don't have a lot of silver, which is interesting. And that's really cool. What is this one? Oh, that's just part of this guy. So yeah, I believe that these are just tiny Begonia silver dollar propagations. I find that when I propagate by leaf, sometimes it puts out little shoots. So here is a Begonia silver dollar right here, hiding under the labecia. Those are so tiny, like those are tinier than my nail, and yet they're so detailed. And the veining is just so cool. So what I think has happened is there's this little tiny silver dollar, and I think it has put out a shoot and put out this little baby, I think. I don't want to dig everything up to be sure. And what else is in here? I used to have a Begonia iron cross in here, which have really cool texture. They're also called Begonia masoniana. I used to have one in here, but I think it died. I think it rotted. And that's the thing with terrariums is it's great, but once a plant starts to rot, I find it really hard to bring it back from rot. I think once it starts rotting, it's gone. And I think that's what happened to my Begonia iron cross. I would love to get that plant again. It also has really, really cool texture. But I haven't seen one since that one. So for now, I don't have one. Okay, my next begonia, this one gets very direct light. So I am talking about my Begonia silver dollar, which is down here. And on this shelf, this is a grow light, this silver thing. I've turned it off just for filming because I find it doesn't look great on camera. but it is giving full light, full spectrum light to the Begonia Silver Dollar, which is right here. I would say that probably this plant right now is one of my favorites, and it is because it is about to bloom. I'm gonna take it out and show you up close, but I just wanted to show you where it's growing and how it's growing, and how much light it likes. I have grown this in lower light, and it has less silver. It still grows, but less silver. But to get that full silver leaf, I find that it really loves that full sun all the time. And of course, being under a humidity dome has helped it grow a lot as well. So I'm gonna pull that out so that you can see it up close and see the little blooms. The situation that this plant is living in, I found this cloche or humidity dome at a thrift store, and it didn't have the bottom, like cloches often have sort of a accompanying glass dish or something. It didn't have that, so I've just been using whatever plate I have that works. I've also used ice cream bucket lids. Those work really well, but this is just a plate. And then it's just in a nursery pot like this. And actually there are some roots coming out the bottom. I've been trying not to worry about that. I don't really want to disturb this plant while it is doing so well. Now we can see this leaf is absolutely huge. It's curling under like that because I think it's getting almost too big. I have seen leaves on this plant get even bigger, but at this size, they do start to curl under. I might snip this off in a little bit, but I wanted to leave it on to show you. And I also wanted to leave it on because it's blooming and I don't want to disturb anything else that's going on. But you can see these leaves are absolutely crazy big, and they're pure silver. Like, they are so shiny and metallic looking. They look like they're not real. This plant I have grown in a lot of different situations. I've grown this plant in a large pickle jar, and it just fully took up the whole pickle jar. It was absolutely beautiful. I had to eventually take it out of the jar because it was so big. And then some of the propagations I've put into other terrariums. This was also a propagation of that pickle jar experiment, if you've seen those videos. So if we look at the blooms are looking like they're gonna be pink. I actually have no idea what the blooms look like on Begonia Silver Dollar. I haven't looked into it, and maybe I should have waited till they actually opened before making this video. But I can for sure post an update when they bloom. I hope that they don't, you know, rot or fall off or anything. I'm gonna just keep this plant under its humidity dome. If that is what helped it to bring these buds forward, I would hope that they would be able to bloom in that high humidity as well. Here you can see the stem is kind of brown, and that is where other leaves have been. They grow out and then eventually die off, and then the stem kind of has these little dents, I guess, where the stems were. That's apparently totally normal. I've seen other people with begonias. That is what their begonias are doing as well. And the actual stems are basically hot pink, red, and hairy. I love this plant, if you can't tell. The baby leaves are absolutely adorable. They're tiny and yet so detailed. And they're all different. So you can see here, this one has tons of silver, and then this one is almost like a polka dot situation. And then as they grow up in full light, they do get basically all silver. When I have grown this with less light, they have less silver, but are still absolutely beautiful. So Begonia Silver Dollar, I would say, is probably my favorite and the one that I'm having the most success with. I would love to get more humidity domes like that. I think begonias really like them. I have seen a few people growing them under those domes that you can buy for the garden, and I've definitely considered getting a few of those. And if I do get another larger begonia, I probably will try those. I always scour thrift stores for glass vessels for plants. specifically for begonias because there's just such a wide selection. Last but not least, I don't know if I should include this one, but I'm going to. Now, you can see right here in this little jar, there is a begonia leaf right there. And it is not putting out any shoots yet, but it has rooted into the moss. That is again a begonia zumba. Apparently I love begonia zumbas. And it's growing in this jar with my jewel orchid. So let me take the lid off for you. So there's the jewel orchid. She's doing really well. I don't know a ton about jewel orchids, but I'm doing my best. The moss has really come alive, which is really, really beautiful to watch. This was just like dried moss and now it's coming alive, which is really, really cool. And there's that rooted leaf. I'm not going to touch it because I think it's probably fairly fragile. I planted that leaf in there about two weeks ago, I want to say. And the reason I know it's rooted is because it hasn't rotted. If the leaf starts to rot right away before putting out shoots, you unfortunately have lost the leaf. But if it doesn't rot and it's just sitting there looking pretty, it is busy rooting in, and pretty soon you will see some growth. Usually the growth will start at the back and sort of come over top of the leaf. It's honestly really, really fun to watch. And yeah, I guess I really do love begonias. All right, friends, that is my entire begonia collection. I know it's not huge, but it brings me a lot of joy. I would say I am becoming more and more in love with begonias as I learn how to care for them properly. I definitely have a few begonias that I would love to grow someday, specifically the ones that have really cool polka dots. There's a begonia called Begonia amphioxus, I believe, and it's like neon green with pink polka dots. Just such a weird alien plant. So I definitely have a list of begonias that I am eyeing. But for now, I'm just happy watching these plants grow, learning how to care for them, learning how to spoil them. And the fact that I have a begonia blooming in my house it's a good feeling. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I enjoyed showing them to you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and hope to see you next time. Bye.